Welcome to this week's Scots in Us podcast, where we're going to take a deep dive into Paisley. Paisley is the largest town in Scotland, 20 minutes from Glasgow, and right now it is undergoing a real regeneration. A £100 million project is underway, the cornerstone of which is their museum. The project for the museum is Paisley Redesigned. So join us as we speak to Alasdair Morrison, Head of Economy and Development for Renfrew Council, to hear of the vision for this town, and then with Kirsty Devine, Project Director of Paisley Reimagined, and all that is going on in the museum. Alasdair, good morning. I am delighted I'm able to join you in Renfrewshire, in Paisley, to discuss all that is going on in a very, very large capital improvement campaign that is underway. So to begin, you are the Head of Economy and Development for Renfrew Council. It is for the public and private sectors you've worked in, and you currently oversee the council's regeneration of this area. We're talking in this program also to Kirsty Devine about the museum, which is a huge regeneration on its own of over $60 million. But when I was chatting to you earlier, you pointed out that in fact the plan is for the whole area to undergo a $325 million regeneration over the next 10 years that covers the high street and the area surrounding it, which is really going to have a huge impact on everything. You really are undertaking a huge new phase in the development of Paisley. Could you take us back to the early days of Paisley and how this wonderful town that sits just outside Glasgow, just 10 minutes away from Glasgow, and is the largest town, I believe, outside the major cities, is now making this huge step forward?
Okay, good morning, Camilla. I'll try and do that for you. So Paisley, largest town in Scotland, around about 79,000 inhabitants, residents. We have been formed on the back of a major textile industry, which grew up around the creation of the Paisley pattern, which some of your viewers will have heard of, which originated from within the town, and we ended up having an enormous industrial sector based on weaving and textile mills. They came about through two large companies called the Clarks and another one called the Coates, which has now had various iterations, but it's still in existence as JP Coates, which again some of your viewers may have come across. And at one time they were, by all records, the third largest multinational company in the world, and they were based here in this relatively small town on the side of the River in central Scotland. So the textile mills basically were the town. They dominate the town. Unfortunately, the skyline is still dominated by a number of their legacy elements. So we still have two very large mill buildings in the centre of the town, again still on the banks of the river, and some very large chimneys that were associated with that. So from wherever you are in the town and outside the town on the hills surrounding it, you can see that legacy, that industrial legacy from the Victorian era. What these Victorians then did as a result of their generosity was that they started to bequeath a huge amount of very iconic buildings and spaces to the people of the town. So they created public parks, which were a part of the Victorian legacy you'll be aware of from elsewhere. But they also, much more than they did in many other towns, they started to put their wealth into signature buildings. So they created Paisley Museum, which is part of our transformation project. They also created the other side of the coin, if you like. The Clark family created the Paisley Town Hall, which is another of our major transformation projects at the moment. But they also created the largest Baptist church well, we consider, certainly in the UK, if not in Western Europe, at Thomas Coates Memorial Church, which is right next door to the museum. And it's an enormous Gothic complex that can seat 1,500 people. And that was all bequeathed alongside lots of other things. We've got an observatory going on. Scotland's very few remaining working observatories, which sits just north of the museum. Again, that was bequeathed by the Coates family to the people. And we've got lots of little pocket parks and, as you would expect, statues to these people around the town. So the legacy, the heritage legacy, is absolutely enormous. We've got now, as a result of that, we've now got the second highest concentration of listed buildings. So basically historic buildings of note outside of Edinburgh in Scotland. So we've got 123 listed buildings just in the town centre alone, of which 17 are category A. And that concentration is unlike, you know, almost anywhere else. So we've got this huge legacy. The difficulty we've had, and I guess we'll be coming on to this, is the economic challenges that have happened over the last 50 years. And that has seen the growth of a lot of different social trends, you know, the rise in car ownership, the rise of out-of-town retailing, online retailing, et cetera. And because of that, Camilla, the town itself, and particularly the town centre, has become a if you like, what the colloquial terminology is the poster boy for town centre decline.
I think what you're bringing up is actually a very common challenge, isn't it? It's the high street. How to make the high street appealing and the town centre the destination it needs to be. But you're really putting together a wonderful destination for people to visit and know that they can be visiting this wonderful museum. I'm looking forward to talking to Kirsty enormously about all that's coming along, because I know there's a lot of concentration upon the family, and the community input has been very important. But you're making downtown a destination, playing into the historical, but also saying we need to appeal to today.
Definitely, we need to keep the best of yesteryear, but we need to then adapt and tell a wider story going forward. What we need to bring into that mix as well, Camilla, is the fact that, as you said yourself, town centres are changing. So a lot of people don't want to go for physical shopping as much as they want to go with you know, using the internet and other means now, and out of centre facilities. So the town centre needs to be an awful lot more than just retailing, and that's been particularly difficult in a town like Paisley, simply because of the scale that it had grown to. So we had at one time, and we are coming down in size, I'll come on to that in a second, but at one time we had 480 retail units in our town centre. So it was pulling in a catchment of people from you know, far and wide to come to this, you know, basically this very, very vibrant and busy place, a commercial hub for the whole hinterland, for the whole catchment. Now, what's happened as a result of changing fortunes in town centre is that retail offer needs to significantly shrink in size. And the difficulty with doing that is that you've obviously got investors and pension funds who've paid a lot for these buildings and a lot for these assets, and they don't want to recoup losses. They want to basically hold on to their value. But the difficulty is they've paid for assets now that are worth a fraction of what they were worth before. So all of that comes together into this repurposing piece, of which the museum and the town hall that I mentioned play a part. But it's also about much wider than that. It's also about getting commercial interest to invest into new uses within that town centre, within that high street. So that would include hotels, residential, cultural facilities, community facilities, you know, small scale retail, cafes, restaurants. So it's much more than just retail.
Well, you know, I first became very interested in what you were doing back in about 2019, or maybe, no, 2017, when you launched a project called Paisley 2020. And you were doing a lot around arts and culture. And one of your winners at the under 18 was Lisa Kowalski, who we then brought to New York to represent young people. And I really learned a lot more about Paisley at that time. This hasn't been something that's just occurred and they were thinking they'd redo the museum and this, that. Now, this has been a very large, well thought through capital project, as you're saying. You know, $350 million is a large commitment to the region.
Yeah, it is, and if you're, you know, if your viewers are interested, your listeners are interested, there's a fantastic document called The Untold Story, which was published in about 2014, and that was the start of the journey, Camilla. And that's the thing that tells you about all these plans that we had going way back, that how we would use cultural heritage as an absolute anchor to build and to regenerate the town and the town centre. That was the one that first touted the idea of the museum project, the town hall project, but also this bidding for UK capital city of culture, which unfortunately in the end we were unsuccessful in. But we were in the final five. We were right down to the short list, against some much bigger hitters, if you like, you know, much bigger cities. So we did really well to get to that stage. But you're right, it fostered and engendered this real feeling of momentum, and this feeling of, you know, we can be a success again for a place, and for the local people, you know, given the heritage and everything that's gone before. I mean, it's so important to them the town comes back into a vibrant place.
Well, I think so also, all of this makes Glasgow more of an airport destination and jumping off spot. Then, you know, that helps as well, because you are so close to Glasgow. Glasgow also is such a fabulous train ride up to Inverness and up to the north, and to Aberdeen. I mean, I think it makes you more of a whole hub destination.
Well, I mean, yes, we as you say, we're 10 minutes on the train. So in US and North American urban terms, that's, you know, just a blink of an eye. But we're 10 minutes on the train from central Glasgow to central Paisley, and we have 10 trains an hour as a service. So it's a very, very frequent service. It's basically a walk up, walk on, walk off type train service, and so it makes us feel as if we're part of that wider conurbation, that wider metro area. And the airport, we host the airport. The airport is a mile and a half from where I'm sitting here today in central Paisley. It's a mile and a half up the road. So we're part of that bigger metropolitan feeling.
And that helps. So just for a moment, if you could tell us a little bit about the arts and cultural focus of Paisley. You know, arts, that's going to play quite a large role in what you're doing, and the festivals and other things that you have happening in the city.
Yeah, we've got a veritable riches of arts and culture taking place. We have a program of events throughout the whole calendar year. You know, probably culminating in our autumn spree festival, and it brings together, you know, a whole host of things in terms of literature and music and poetry and performance and such like, and it brings lots of people to the town. But throughout the whole calendar year, we base it on that, and we've got a lot to pull from, Camilla. I mean, the museum itself, I mean, when it reopens, people will be able to see this for themselves. But you know, there is just an absolute, you know, vast array of exhibits and things that some of which have never been seen before.
Well, I hope that in the coming months and the coming weeks, we could return and maybe look a little bit at what you're going to be doing within the town, with the town hall, and seeing maybe more of the historic architecture and factories and different ways you're going to be repurposing things. It's truly fascinating, and I'm really excited for us to know more. And of course, the Spey Festival, that will be another time when hopefully we can be in touch with you and sharing with everybody all that's going on in Paisley at that time.
We would absolutely love that, Camilla. We'd love to continue the conversation with you and your listeners. I mean, the music is another big factor. You mentioned Lisa Kowalski there, just briefly in terms of coming to New York, but music is a massive part of the arts and cultural scene here in Paisley. You know, we've got a lot of, you know, as well as the likes of Paolo Nutini, who's a current favourite, but we've got some fantastic people who've been involved here, including things like Pace Youth Theatre, which we must speak to you more about, but they've just established a new centre, again, regenerating an old building right in the centre of the town beside the rail station, and that's home to 500 plus children use that on a weekly basis in terms of youth and theatre and performance. And it's become renowned for some great names that have come through there, and some of the acting names from the past here, like David Tennant and Gerard Butler and people like that who originate from Paisley. So there's a rich legacy.
So I hope that we can see how we can get you over to New York also, maybe with some of the arts and cultural side of things as well, and maybe focus on how the museum is playing such a large role in this regeneration.
Sure. No, that would be fantastic. I mean, like we say, it's one of our flagship projects, and we believe it can form the centerpiece of this much wider regeneration piece for the whole town.
Well, thank you for taking time this morning, and I look forward to catching up with you soon, Alasdair. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Camilla.
Good morning, Kirsty, and thank you for joining us today as we take a deep dive into Paisley and Paisley Redesigned and all that is happening in the largest town in Scotland.
It is, yes.
So, Kirsty, you are the project director for Paisley Redesigned. It's a capital improvement project which is $60 million, for over 42 million pounds. But as we've been hearing from Alasdair about the whole project, it's part of a 250 million pound regeneration of the area. But this is like the leading jewel in the crown. So could we begin by speaking about the history to the museum and where it comes from and where we are going?
Of course. Yeah, really happy to. And it's nice to talk to you this morning, this afternoon, different time zones.
All upside down.
All upside down. So yes, as you say, Paisley Museum Reimagined project is part of a wider cultural regeneration strategy, and it's the leading project in around £100 million worth of investment in the town centre. And that came out of, and Alasdair may have mentioned this, the Untold story, which was the strategy for regeneration. And that's really because we know that culture has that power to transform lives. It sort of defines who we are and it helps us shape our communities. And the museum is located right in the centre of Paisley, on the High Street. And we were really, it has a really interesting history. So the museum is 150 years old. We just had the anniversary last year. It opened in 1871, but actually it was added to over the course of 150 years. So there was a number of architectural extensions between 1871 and 1974. So the actual museum itself comprises of 4 buildings. There's the main museum, there is the observatory, which is at the top of the hill. There is what we call Transit House, which is a small historic building linked to astrological time. And there are the Oakshaw properties. And those are the historic buildings, and they are what we would call in Scotland listed. So they're Grade A and Grade C listed buildings. So that comes with certain safeguarding and certain limitations in terms of what we can do architecturally. And yeah, as I say, it's over the 150 years, it's not been a strategic master planning. They were added to in a fairly ad hoc way as money became available. They also built up the hill, so just to add to the complications. And really by the time we get to the late 20th, early 21st century, the building's probably not fit for purpose for visitors in the 21st century. So we didn't have a cafe. Access around the building was really difficult. Visitors would get lost, would think they had completed all areas of the building. If you had any kinds of mobility issues, or if you were there with young children, it was quite difficult to move around because there weren't lifts or elevators to move around the building. So there was definitely work.
And also people's way of enjoying an exhibit has changed so much. And so this is going to give you, so the experience is going to be enhanced and brought forward.
Definitely.
In such a huge way. And the observatory is sort of quite a large part of this project, almost separate to the museum, isn't it?
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you're raising about the observatory separate. And I think previously visitors would have understood it in that way. It was quite a disjointed campus. And actually, I'm not sure that visitors always knew that we had an observatory, and it's the oldest public observatory in Scotland. So it's a real gem for us. But a big part of the project was to rethink or reimagine the museum to be one unified campus, so that when you came into the building, you knew that you can go into the museum, you can go to the observatory, you can use the gardens, and it's seen as one whole museum visit.
And feel like returning, because there's so much to see.
Yeah.
There's a large amount to enjoy and see. And you're very close to Glasgow, which I must remember and to remind our listeners, you're just a few minutes from Glasgow. So this is going to be a wonderful, easy experience for visitors to have.
Yeah, we're 7 miles from Glasgow, and you can get a train from the centre of Glasgow every 10 minutes. I think we're the 4th most busy train station outside of the capital city and Glasgow. So it's very easy to get to Paisley and spend the day. And part of this wider regeneration that Alasdair would have talked about, part of the intention of that is to keep people in the town for longer and be able to visit the museum and other venues. But you're absolutely right. We have 350,000 objects in the collection. There was less than 0.02% of the collection on display in the museum, and although it's not unusual for museum collections to only have a small percentage on display, we weren't changing it. So part of the plan for the museum is we're more than doubling the number of objects on display, and then we will rotate the collections after opening so that there would be reasons for you to come back. And what we found from all our visitor research in the early stages of the project was that although we had a very loyal core number of visitors who came more than 4 times a year, came around 7 times a year, there was also a lot of lapsed visitors. And the reason that people weren't coming back was they felt that they had seen everything. So why did you need to come back? And the other side of it, I think, is that we found that the dwell times in the museum were really low for museum visiting. So it was under 30 minutes that people would spend in the museum. Now, you would expect a museum, to hold visitors for around 2 hours. And there's lots of reasons. We didn't have a cafe, so people just left to go and get a cup of coffee somewhere else and didn't necessarily come back. But the displays were quite static. It was quite a passive museum experience. So
you're really bringing it forward. You're giving a complete redesign, as you call the project, or it's a regeneration. And I think it's very exciting. And we've known about the Paisley project for a few years now, because we were part of being involved in when you did the call out for the 2020, when you were trying to be the city. City for 2020, and we were involved in that back in about 2017-18, and so we knew that a lot was going on about regeneration. And then you did this wonderful call out for Paisley objects, I think in 2020-21, and we thought that was great because you were involving the community and everybody in what you were doing, and that was. So was that very successful? Did you get lots of people sending you strange objects and images?
That's an ongoing campaign at the moment for one of the displays, where we are crowdsourcing and looking for objects that are linked to Paisley pattern. But I think a big thing for the museum project has been that there's a lot, Paisley's a really interesting town. Over the centuries, it's been a town that's really associated with innovation, with people being bold and radical and imaginative. So there's lots of other aspects of the town's heritage that are as important, and we're trying to bring that into the displays as well. And as part of,
you're not purely, and I think that's important for everybody to realize, is you're not, though textiles and thread is at the core of Paisley's heritage, you're going much further and in lots of other areas as well.
Yes, I mean, it's not a textile museum, but absolutely the textile heritage will be explored and celebrated. We'll also look at issues around the kind of legacy of empire and colonialism. But the collections that we have are really wide-ranging, diverse, fascinating collections. And that's allowed us to really sort of delve into the detail of Paisley's history and then pull back and think about it in a global aspect as well. So the themes that we're developing for the museum are around Paisley and the pattern, but then Paisley beyond the pattern, and then Paisley in Scotland and Paisley in the world. Because, and you'll know this, Camilla, but there's this kind of real kind of diaspora of people who have left Paisley but still kind of retain really strong emotional bonds. And so we are kind of exploring kind of how we can people the displays. And that has been a big part of the last few years. I mean, you're reminding me that the project's been on the go for, it's been a live project since 2017, and we have another couple of years to go. And I mean, it's not unusual in museum redevelopments, but
those numbers you're talking about as well. I mean, you have really got a large project, and you've done other large projects like this when you were with the Riverside Museum, etc. So, but this is very exciting because you're really helping the whole town come together. You're the core, the jewel at the top, but the whole town is getting a regeneration and a refocus. We spoke about how we worked with Falkirk with the Kelpies, and it reminds me of that, this refocusing and really making Paisley a bigger destination again.
Yeah, I think, we've always seen ourselves as being not just a museum at the end of the high street operating in isolation from all of the other activities that take place within the town or could take place. And the aims and objectives of the museum from the start were to be a leading international museum, but to be the sort of a destination for visitors from across Scotland, and also to be a hub at the heart of the town and a local resource. So what's been really critical, I think, over the last 5 or so years of the project is being able to engage with local communities. And we are co-producing our displays. So our curatorial and research teams are working with a whole range of individuals and organisations, both locally and internationally, to reinterpret the collections and to tease out the stories from the collections that are relevant and accessible to people. So we have worked on the displays with over 1,300 people, over 2,000 hours of engagement to develop 10 displays and an introductory gallery. But we're also co-producing our public programme, which we have been working on for the last couple of years, and we work with over 70 organisations within Renfrewshire, and Renfrewshire is the historic county that Paisley sits within, to identify what people's interests and needs were, and that's really then sort of helping us to shape the public programme, because what we're really trying to develop, I suppose, is a manifesto for the museum based on visitor need. So things that were coming out that were really important to people were things around play and literacy, but also community health and well-being, confidence and belonging and ownership, and that sense of like the museum belonging to people and people seeing themselves in the museum, that's been really critical. So as we've researched the collections and are developing the interpretation and developing public programs, that is in collaboration with all of our communities.
I think also when we say we involve families, we also really have a heavy emphasis on children, because if the children enjoy it and have things to do, they want to keep coming back, and then you have them for life.
Well, teenagers is always a challenging gap in that that time span, because there's always other things sometimes, but teenagers is also an audience that we're really keen to target. So for all of our displays, every single display has an identified interpretive audience. So one of those audiences is families. And when we talk about families, we do mean carers with children, so it's an intergenerational visit. And then we specifically have displays which are targeted at early years, so under 5s. And so all of the things that you can do in that display and the text that's used is developed with that audience in mind. And then we also look at schools and young people and then sensory impaired audiences as well. So it doesn't, creating a display for one particular audience doesn't exclude any other audiences, but it's just about how do you provide things for people to do that's engaging and relevant to them. Multi-layered.
We're going to hopefully keep up with you in the next few months and come back to see you. But before we go today, could you sort of tell me 2 or 3 of your favorite things that are going on, some of the displays or objects that you're really excited about, that are a little bit small or large?
Small or large? Well, I think one thing we're in kind of early stages of, but I am quite excited about, is we are developing what we've been calling the introductory gallery, which is right in the historic core of the museum. And it'll give people a whistle-stop tour of Paisley and Renfrewshire, so the history and the equivalent of 30 seconds. But we are co-producing that story with young people. So we are working with people between 14 and 25 years old to develop the narratives. And it feels quite scary, because it would be easier in some ways for us as a curatorial and content team just to map out the content and develop it. But it will be much more engaging. I think it's a fully immersive digital show which will form part of that gallery. So really kind of keen to see how that develops over the next year or so. But I suppose what I'm excited about as well is all of our stories, all of our displays that we are co-producing with groups. We are in the sort of final stages of developing those. So we've been working with Syrian refugees who have been interpreting the Syrian glass collection with us. We've been working with a group who live locally of women and non-binary people to develop a display around the socialist movement, and their sort of perspective and take and integrity in the way that they have developed those displays. It's been so rewarding to watch and to see it really begin to come to life. We're into almost the 3D stage of it now. We've worked on it on paper for so long. We're at the kind of more soon to be in the fit out stage of it. And then obviously it's coming alive. And I think at the moment as well, we're about halfway through the build program as well. So we're starting to see the building come out the ground. We've seen a lot of the accretions to the building over the past few years that have been taken down, and we're seeing the design that ALA, Amanda Levy architects have developed really begin to take shape, and that makes it feel very real. And people often use, it's a bit of an overused word, but they talk about it will be transformative. But actually, I do think in this instance with this museum project, the Reimagined project is transformative. It will change the building for people. I think there will be enough there that people will give them comfort for what they remembered before, the things that they liked, but it will be such a different and good, hopefully different in a good way, good experience for people.
Well, and we're about 2 years away from seeing the doors open.
We've not settled on we're not kind of at a stage where we really have an opening date yet, because we're halfway through the construction programme, but there's still a bit of a way to go before we're
okay. Well, that means we can check back in with you.
You definitely can.
And maybe you'll put a hard hat on next time and we'll go for a bit of a look around with you. That would be fantastic, so that we can sort of be a part of this ongoing wonderful story.
No, happy to do that. Happy to give you an update.
Oh, good. Okay, well, thank you so much. It's been great to catch up with you. It was lovely when we met last November in the part of the conference. That was great. And so now we've learned a little bit more today. So thank you, Kirsty.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Take care.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us today as we took a deep dive into Paisley, Scotland's largest town in the midst of such a tremendous regeneration. Join us on the first and third Monday of the month as we bring you a new episode of Scots in Us. And to find out more of the work of the American Scottish Foundation, visit our website, americanscottishfoundation.org, to learn more. Until next time.